Here we go.
Welcome, welcome everyone. Happy Tuesday. So glad you're here. We'll get started in just a moment. In the meantime, you want to pull up your chat window, pull up your Q&A. You can say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from. If you want to increase your community networking, you can put in your LinkedIn. It's always good to have new friends on LinkedIn. We'll give it about a minute before we kick things off today. Welcome, welcome. If you're just joining, we'll get started in just a moment or two. Pull up that chat, pull up that Q&A. I see some people are letting us know where they're from, which is great. I see a fellow Connecticut person has joined. Be sure if you want to share your LinkedIn, you put it in the webinar chat and not the Q&A. I don't think anyone can see that. All right, it is 2 after, and I know we have a full session, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. So with that, good morning or good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Data Targeting and Methodology Selection to Maximize Response Rates. Before we begin, just a few quick notes. We encourage you to participate in the chat and submit your questions to the Q&A pod at any time. We're going to open the floor for questions at the end, and if we don't get to your questions, we will follow up afterwards. As you engage in the conversation, we simply ask that everyone remain respectful and constructive. The Insights Association is committed to maintaining a professional and welcoming space for all participants. A recording of today's session will be sent via Zoom tomorrow. Closed captioning is available. Just click the CC button on your screen. Today's webinar is sponsored by TTH Communications. The Insights Association is serving as the host, and all content shared today is provided by TTH Communications. An IA does not endorse or guarantee any product, service, or company. Now let's get started. Today, I'm going to welcome our moderator, Peg McGregor. She is the president of strategic partnerships at TTH Communications. Peg has been with the company for about 2 years and is responsible for working closely with and supporting TTHC's clients in all their market research efforts. And I'll turn it over to Peg.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. We're so pleased that you joined us today. So over the last few years, TTHC has aggressively been building its capabilities around market research. We provide our clients with not only the data to build sample frames and panels with reliability, but our platform provides a new multimodal capability. So we can do live calls, we can do IVR surveys, email, text, and small format town halls. These modes all come together in a single environment where you can read completes in real time and drive to insights on a single platform. We've worked aggressively to help clients deal with the challenges in the market research world today. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone on this call that declining response rates have become one of the most persistent challenges in market research. As audiences become harder to reach and more selective about participation, the success of a research study increasingly depends on two critical factors, in my view. One, precision in targeting, and two, thoughtful selection of engagement and outreach methodologies. Our panel today includes a group of folks very well versed in the challenges of market research, and they bring to the table years of methodology, data, and analytics expertise for our discussion today. So I'd like to begin first with introductions, and Paul, maybe you could start us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Westcott. I am president of L2. I've been with the company for 12 years, and I work with all of our research partners and other partners who are helping make that research possible, like TTH and others. So it's great to be here, and thanks for having us, Peg.
Thanks for joining, Lisa.
Hi, good morning or afternoon, wherever you're located, and thank you so much for PEG and TTH Communications for having us today. I'm Lisa Mancini, and I'm with GDCC West, and we are your outsourced partner for all your phone, SMS, email, market research surveys. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Joel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Lalone, and I'm from way upstate New York. I'm at SUNY Jefferson as a part of the State University of New York, and I am the director of the Center for Community Studies. In my semi-retirement, I was a mathematics professor for 37 years. So we are a survey shop housed on a college campus, as I'm sure virtually all of you are in states where that exists. We're the only one of the 62 SUNY college units that has a survey research shop, and we use all of the modalities that Peg and Lisa and Paul just mentioned. And we're excited to be here and have a conversation with all of you.
Matt?
Thanks, Pega. My name is Matt Hayes. I've been with TGHC for the past 6 years. Prior to that, I spent 45 years, or some would say a lifetime, with Burnett Research. At TTHC, I'm spearheading our entry into the marketing research industry and excited to be working with the likes of Lisa and many others of my former clients.
Okay, so let's get started. So the bad news, we all know response rates have been declining across nearly every form of survey research for years. The good news, at the same time, researchers have access to more communications channels and more targeting data than ever before. The challenge isn't simply reaching people, it's reaching the right people at the right time through the right methodology. Today's discussion is going to focus on better data targeting and smarter methodology selection and how that can significantly improve participation while protecting the integrity of the research. I think the right place to start this morning is a really direct, straightforward question and understanding the decline in response rates. So to my panel, why have response rates declined so dramatically over the last few years?
So I can jump in here first. So response rates, this is a structural shift overall. They're declining because the environment has fundamentally changed what we have all been used to and accustomed to the past 20 years. People are well overwhelmed with digital communication. They're much more proactive and guarded with their time and their resources. They're skeptical of outreach, especially outreach they're not familiar with. It's really not one thing or one factor. It's a combination of survey fatigue, channel saturation, medium saturation, and just declining trust overall in the industry. They're just being overloaded in areas they're just not comfortable with.
I mean, to your point, Lisa, you can't go anywhere these days without being hit with a follow-up survey, whether it be a restaurant where you made a reservation, a trip you went on, how was your hotel stay? People are just getting bombarded with surveys all the time.
They are not just surveys, they're getting bombarded with calls, well, it's whether it's telemarketing or a sales call or a call that is, a spam call. There's just a lot of
Right.
ways people are getting hit in different directions. So it's much more challenging in our industry to overcome that.
And the thing to do is identify ways to overcome it and make it more palatable for people to express their opinions, which is what we're doing.
Absolutely. And offering people many modalities. And that's where the SMS has been great the last 4 or 5 years and really helping increase those response rates and even the pickup rates when you bundle it together.
And
Agreed.
and are the response rates affected in a major way based on certain populations? So are there certain demographics where the challenge is greater than others?
I would say there is definitely demographics that are more challenging depending upon what mode you're using. And that's where you have to target the right mode with the right demographic that you're looking to achieve.
Right. It's not a one size fits all
It's not a
approach.
one size, phone used to be the goal. That's you call reached everybody by phone, and now, as you know, there's many other mediums you have to reach out to
That's
and incorporate and bundle that together.
precisely.
Joel, what's your experience there?
Well, I don't disagree with anything that Lisa and Matt were just saying about the likely factors that have contributed to what we've seen. And we've been in existence for 27 years. We started in 1999. And I didn't mention in my biography, my testimonial there at the beginning, but it might help folks to understand that we do about 5 to 10 surveys a year, survey studies. So we're not the University of Michigan, we're not the University of Indiana, but I would say we have much more of a reason to be focusing on response rates and participation rates than they do, because in our world, we survey within New York State. In fact, we very commonly survey county specific. So if someone asked us to do a nationwide survey, I'd say that's easy. We have such a big sampling frame from which to pull. We have counties that we survey, and we say to the clients that we're going to get 400 to 500 completes, and there are only 20,000 adults in that county. There is no way that one sampling modality would be able to do the arithmetic on your phone quick, 400 out of 20,000, if we had 100% no undercoverage on our sampling frame and so on, is virtually impossible. So we have had to, for 20 years, we were a live interviewer call phone center. And then we supplemented with email push to web. And then we supplemented with now text message push to web, because we want to get what the client wants, participation, to be able to make decisions. So we have seen, if I go back to the question of why, we certainly have seen a little bit of participant fatigue and saturation, but we also have seen a whole lot of lack of trust in the last 10 years. I want to know that this is legitimate. I want to know that they're not going to steal my identity. I want to know why it's used. So we have changed to try to establish that legitimacy and trust by now, even if we don't have clients that want an IRB certification and process, every one of our surveys, and we thought this would kill our response rates, to have folks have to read this statement of all of their rights and click agree, and the reverse has happened. The reverse has happened where folks now realize we give how do you contact us with methodological questions and so on. We earn their trust, and probably most importantly is I couldn't even guess to you how many times in our introductory script in any one of the modalities we say please and thank you and you're important and thank you for caring about the community and thank you for trying to make a difference. If they trust the legitimacy and you use some people skills, we have found that has, in some of the modalities, been able to reverse the decrease in response rates. Some of them are actually increasing now for us.
I think also that this year might be another challenging year, simply because we're in a midterm election season. So there's tons of political polls. I think, Lisa, maybe you were talking to that earlier.
Yeah, and so while there's some variation that exists, we're seeing this decline across all mediums. It's whether it's political, customer sat, or public policy. It's really less about what the content is and more about the behavior overall on a broader scale of how people engage with the outreach. Now, one of the bigger shifts is certain people are harder to reach. Younger people, mobile users only, which are heavy within the political environment. Transient individuals, they require much more way of intentional reach out to them. While it's clear that matters, meeting people where they're at and what's important to them is what's most critical. And when you have a heavy election cycle, you have a lot more phone calls, SMSs going out, email outreach going out. So people are less likely to take a call or an SMS on another survey type that's out there. So the heavier political cycle, the more it reaches out and touches everything else we're doing in the world of market research.
Right. So just reinforcing that notion of survey fatigue, channel overload,
Yep.
and some of the issues around the population, which kind of leads me into our next topic, where I'd like to talk about data targeting strategies. And I think there are kind of two core questions here that I think are important. One is, how do you target your audience more effectively? And how does that improve response rates? So maybe, Paul, you could jump in here to start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So we maintain a national voter file and a national consumer database in the United States. So it's around 264 million consumers, 217 million voters. And so when researchers tap into that database, they're starting obviously with the underlying understanding these are 18 plus adults in the US or they're registered voters, which is a good baseline. But going even deeper, typically what we're having researchers on the political side, they're looking at party ID, they're looking at vote history, they're looking at primary ballot selection, things like that. On the consumer side and on the voter side, they're looking at baseline demographics, things like age, looking at gender, looking at the other flags that we can attribute to known data and information that we try to attribute to almost every single record in our database, making it easier for researchers to be able to build out those, make those selections, be able to have that baseline understanding of the audience they're reaching out to and doing good targeting. And then, of course, attaching or connecting all of the contact methods with that. But on the demographic front, it's all about, the reliability and scale and making sure that, the researchers have the data they need.
Yeah, I
Lisa?
agree with what you said, Paul. There, better targeting absolutely improves response rates because the relevance of why you're contacting them is what drives the engagement and the contact and the pickup. When people feel like what you're calling them about applies to them, or they can connect with a branding, if you've used a caller ID with your client's name or the voter district they're from, it's about reaching, not about reaching more people, but it's about really reaching the right people with the right relevance.
And
And
to your
Joel, I know
point,
you've
like,
had
oh,
some,
sorry,
sorry,
sorry.
Matt, go ahead. Go ahead. No,
I was gonna
sorry,
say
my
to
apologies.
Lisa's point into something Joel alluded to earlier. When you have limited sample, it's important to touch the person, where in the method they want. It may be sending out an initial MMS message, following up with an SMS message later to reinforce the person to complete the survey. We also have a client who does a combination live call texting, and they will send the respondents a text initially saying, if you don't respond now, we're going to call you in a couple days. So answer the questions now. We won't bother you later. So you can be creative in your outreach to people, but it's as I said, it's just a matter of staying on people without being overload.
Right, it's about the smart timing of it, giving the
Right.
life cycle, giving a rest with the sample and the outreach, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 5 days between different ways that you reach out to them.
Yeah,
That's the
we like to
critical
say
piece.
it's a simple nudge. Push them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I also think, we talked about survey fatigue. We talked about being bombarded. I think the more targeted you can get with your data, the better opportunity you have to pre-qualify your sample, and on the basis of that, maybe avoid having to ask specific questions during the course of the survey. So fewer questions, quicker responses, not taking up as much of somebody's time as you might otherwise have to, I think all point to a really key reason that data targeting is so critical. And Joel, I think you've seen this a lot in the research that we've worked on with you as well.
We have one going on right now that yesterday, as we did our dry run, I told you I'd have results today, and I'll let you decide, Peg,
Yes.
in a moment if
I
you
know
want
Bravo.
me
you
to
were
share
dying
some
to
hot
get to
off the
that.
Bravo,
dome.
please.
But 100%, we would not exist without the ability to target. And I have no idea who the folks are who are on this webinar participating. And if they know more than I about the next topic, I certainly would love to learn from them. But my impression is when you have a county in upstate New York that only has 20,000 adults, good luck in finding a probability or non-probability proprietary panel that is going to get you a sample from that one county. To my knowledge, I can't imagine that it exists. So therefore, what we do is our list management by using a service like L2. And we are targeting by county to be able to get a sufficiently large sampling frame from which to pull. So our county specific results, which certainly a whole lot of, we're in Elise Stefanik's congressional district, and there are some political perspectives in there too, but most of them we're looking at quality of life, what I think folks and insights might call policy type of research, support or oppose for potential policies. We're looking at perceived barriers to participating in something. What are the choices you're making? We're looking at kind of a social science, and We are doing one right now where the largest topic in an omnibus survey that we're doing is on childcare issues that we've identified over the last 10 years are getting increasingly challenging to folks in upstate New York. So our target population of that has been defined by local experts as households that have at least one child under the age of 12, or excuse me, under the age of 13, 12 or under. So I was telling the folks on this panel yesterday that we had spent 10 days sampling, got 2,500 participants to fill out the survey in a 4-county region, which is wonderful. And 300 of them indicated that they had at least one child age 12 or younger in there. So slightly, 12 to 13%. Well, the U.S. Census says it's a higher rate than that would have that. Not tremendously higher, but it would be higher. And if you take county-specific results and take those 300 and divide by the 4 counties uniformly, that's 75 per county. The county leaders want more. So what are we doing today? Oversampling. So this morning we sent only 2 MMS messages to cell phones of groups that did not get randomly selected last week. And we picked up 200 in the first hour and a half.
Wow. Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So we have to be careful in how you blend that in and how you weight because we have different populations here. But there is a need for clients who want to be able to cross-tab within the county and identify what are the biggest barriers for the low-income single mom parents in our small county. We had to oversample, and it's been incredibly helpful for us.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the other conclusion is sort of how you sequence the different modalities to maximize how you get your responses and your completes in the process. Changing the topic just a tiny bit. I know, Joel, that in your market research world, you don't use incentives, but this might be for Lisa. And what I'm wondering is, have you seen whether or not better targeting kind of outweighs incentives in terms of response rates and completes?
I think in many cases, especially with the B2B type of work, targeting is more important than incentives. Incentives definitely will help boost your response rate, but it's not going to fix poor targeting. Staying committed to targeting who your audience is and reaching out to them, even if it's 30% less reach outs and sample, that is going to give you more gain than it will be just incentives on their own.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And Paul, I know that you and I have talked on numerous occasions about the data, the reliability of the data, the ability to sort of confirm that the person is in fact a person, and how voter files can help with that. But we've also talked about building some lookalike models and things of that sort. Maybe you'd like to chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, and by the way, I absolutely agree. Targeting over incentives. So that's
absolutely.
So,
absolutely. I think a panel in general is in 100% agreement.
Yeah. Yes.
Definitely from the data provider, though.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I mean, when it comes to record linkage and identifying individuals, that is something that's so critical. And that comes down to the baseline voter files are some of the best data that you can possibly have. The only issue is, of course, if they're not up to date, they have to be clean. You have to remove people who've died, who have moved out of state. And then once you get down to that base file, what you then have to do is make sure the linkage between the contact data and that underlying voter data or the consumer file in that data is matched up, because any data provider at this point worth their salts for consumer or voter information is using multiple sources for both phones, emails, IPs, MAIDs, whatever they're taking and attaching to the file, but particularly on phones, because the phone sources, some of them are great. You've got name, address, date of birth, things like that. Some are a little bit more limited. There's family plans involved. So there's lots of things that we take into account, and we build scores into the data and things like that. But our scores are not based on connectivity. It's based on linkage and understanding understanding that linkage. So, whether it's Joel fielding a survey or anybody, you could actually go in and say, I want the ones and twos versus the threes, fours, and fives to ensure you're getting the highest phone connectivity, to ensure that, if you call somebody and say, hi, is this so-and-so, the likelihood goes way up that you're going to get the correct person versus those lower numbers. And I think that's something that we're obviously always going for 100%, perfection. But the reality is we end up having to realize not every source is created the same. And, as you're evaluating data providers, that's definitely something to look at.
Yeah, I think that's
Paul,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Paul, do you find a lot of people use voter files for consumer studies? Is there much crossover?
Not as much as you'd think. I mean, consumer can have a very broad meaning. Voter file data is specifically for political purposes, political and
Okay.
advocacy purposes. So advocacy is a very big bucket. So you can put a lot of things into advocacy and use voter file data for that. But there's very limited, it's a little bit more of a limited data set. And not every state requires it, but we do apply that in our contracts nationwide. Whereas the consumer data set, obviously unlimited use across it. What
Yes.
we do in our validation of our consumer file, though, is we use, where legally available, we use the voter file to help us clean and identify and help us with that linkage, on the consumer side of things, because financial data is great. It's essentially credit bureau or banking data that you're getting. But that data is never going to be as strong as a voter file. And so that can help, and, one reinforces the other.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we have a few conclusions to draw here. And one is that, data targeting absolutely helps overcome some of the notions of survey fatigue by allowing us to shorten some surveys so that people answer them more quickly. It's not such a burden on their time. There's certain demographic and other types of information that are really helping to reach hard to reach populations and things of that sort, which I think kind of draws us into our next segment, which is really about choosing the right methodology for your survey. So again, to the panel, how should researchers decide which methodology is best for a particular audience?
So talking about phone rates and specifically, so what we know, phone responses have declined. They still have a very important role, especially for certain demographics. And it doesn't necessarily tie to the study and more so to the audience you're looking to talk to. So digital channels offer scalability, but phone can add depth and richness and reach populations that would not be accessible otherwise. And it definitely ties into different generations. Well, Gen Z may be better for your SMS and your email, mobile first, while older demographics still are harder to reach other than phone. So the one size fits all just doesn't work, and you have to reach out to all the different. On the B2B side, having targeted phone numbers, as Paul, you said, those direct phone numbers to those folks' personal cell phones is going to give you a huge boost in your response and pickup rates.
Joel?
I would say it's a combination of two things, of course, it has to do with cost. If we have a client that has X as a budget, we know that with we use 4 different sampling modalities. We use email push to web, we use MMS, SMS, so the text push to web, we use live interview or phone calls, and then our 4th one is for the really difficult, necessary to target subpopulations that none of the above works. We still do the old school intercept sampling, meet them where they are. And I'm sure the panel doesn't want to hear my story again. I'll let you tell me later, Peg, if you want me to go into deeper. So the point is, there are different costs per completes on each one of those 4 modalities. And email push to web is clearly the least expensive for us. Live interviewer on the phone is clearly the most expensive. So can't be ignorant of the fact that cost matters. However, more important to me as a statistics professor for 37 years is data quality. So we're constantly looking at the distribution of raw, unweighted demographics in those 4 different modalities for mode effect. And I can't tell you how microscopically small the rate of getting someone under the age of 30 to do a survey by email push to web is. So I would never, ever suggest to a client that we use that modality if we want to get good results, unless they had some research question about AARP things or something like that. So there's the research question and population of interest that matters. And then there's the facts of cost per complete, and validity and representativeness of the sample, because we're always going to have to wait for non-response. But if you have to wait to the extent that your design effect gets up to be 3 or 4 or something insane like that, then you can't just wait the bias away. You need to improve your data collection and improve the representatives of your sampling. So it is not just a one size fits all for us. There are 3 of us that run this research institute, and we sit and kick around the pros and cons and come up with our sampling protocol and mix for each study.
Well, and I think we've had some experience, Joel and Lisa as well, in the past where we've kind of gone mixed mode. And in some cases, the mixed mode has been really about reminding folks that they received a survey, they haven't completed it yet, and it's time to do so. So maybe talk a little bit about that and the kind of responses we're getting, because I think initially we thought, well, maybe this was a one-shot deal and it was kind of interesting and all of that, but I think we've now got some real repeat report performance to look at. So maybe comment on that, folks.
Sure, I can comment
So,
briefly.
go ahead, Jill.
Okay, I'll be really brief. We've done 5 large studies, large by our definition being a region in New York State or the entirety of all 62 counties in New York State since November. And in November is when the first time that we blasted out an MMS to our sampling frame, said, ooh, people in Manhattan and Queens don't like to fill out our survey. They've never heard of us up here. Our ideas of please and thank you are not working, or as well as we want them to. So out of necessity, again, if you want to cross tab by region or by county, you need a larger aggregate sample size. So we sent 2 days later an SMS to each one of them. And so we had about 700 responses, and then by MMS, and then the SMS at a much lesser cost got about another 350 more. We were really happy with that. We wondered if it would replicate. And as Peg said, we've done it now in 4 more studies. And the most recent one is this childcare one, where the SMS follow-up more than doubled our participation. We ended up having, by MMS, about 700 people fill out the survey. 2 days later, we sent the reminders. And I think it's oh, yeah, I didn't get around to it. But I remember they're legitimate and they're real and they're polite from that long message. And so we had about 700 on Tuesday, and on Thursday by the replies, in about 2 hours, we got another 900. It's incredible. I'm playing psychologist here that I'm not trained to be, but I know what I've seen 5 times in a row in a way that we never would have guessed.
Yeah,
so
at least
aggregate response rates have really gone up.
Yeah, which is really amazing, right? I think that's a key piece of the multi-mode strategy and using multiple methodologies. Lisa, and I know we've had some experience using SMS for live call chasers as well.
Yeah, so looking at like our political work, so we'll generally do somewhere like a 60-40 SMS phone split. But then we'll take it a little bit step further. So we may send an SMS out to the audiences where we feel are harder to reach by phone. We get a boost in that, and we get generally everything we send out within 2 hours, we have 90% of our completes from the SMS. So it's very quick turnaround, and it gives you a good access of what you have to dial on the phone. But then we'll go on the phone, and we'll still have audiences that we haven't reached, and we will send out another SMS letting them know we're going to call them or letting them know to complete it online. And that generally will boost our response rate and our pickup rate by 15 to 20%. So padding it in and chasing them in different ways and reminding them, but giving your sample time to rest, and I kind of mentioned that earlier, is absolutely critical. Not hitting them with 2 or 3 SMS or calls within a 2 or 3 day period. And a lot of our political stuff is quick turnaround. We have 3 or 4 days in the field. So we're very strategic about how we reach out and when we reach out, and very intentional with that.
And
Well,
I
I
might,
mean,
sorry.
go ahead.
I may go one step further with what Lisa's saying. The more information that we have within the sample, whether it be demographic, age, race, ethnicity, we can target those people at the ends of the study. So if we find we're lacking in certain quota groups, we can send texts out just to those people to help push it over the finish line.
And we do that a lot with our gender, especially because, cell phones, we have a split between cell and landline when we dial as well. And cell phone produces a much higher percentage of males than landline does. And so organically, we always
Right.
have more males than we need. So we use SMS to help balance that out.
Well, and both of you, actually, all three of you have touched on this, and I think it's an important point, and that is that when you look at going out and live call, you could be in field for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on what your n equals is, and so there's a variety of different timelines here, right? But in an SMS MMS text environment, as Joel will attest, and Lisa too, for that matter, you measure the tail of the survey literally in hours. So you literally can launch a text survey into the field, and within maybe 48 hours at max, you know exactly how that survey is going, how the responses are coming in. So you get a really good sense of how the survey is going to play out in the field. And I think that's another really important piece of using different modalities to get out there and
Right.
build response.
Right. And you may see someone open up an SMS survey and they never finish it. So then you call them and they would prefer to talk to you on the phone. So just another way to reach the people in their own space.
And
Well, it's
we
also
think,
important to have a software package that links all the modes together, so you know where at
Yes.
any given time where the person is.
Yeah. Having it intertwined is absolutely critical. That's a really good point, Matt.
Right.
right, and having a platform that sort of brings all those different modalities into view so that you're actually seeing response rates in real time, you know where they're coming from, and how people are preferring to respond. So
Correct.
we've talked a bit about now the multimodal process. I want to just jump to one last topic before we hit the Q&A part, and that is, we're all chasing higher response rates. Is there a risk in doing that with sending out these different chasers and things of that nature that we're compromising data quality? What are your views on that?
I think it can, but it doesn't have to be. The key is how you improve response rates. If you're just pushing volume, of course, you're going to risk bias and you're going to bring bias into your data. But if you're using thoughtful, intentional, meaningful mixed methodology, you can improve your response rate and your data quality. Again, it drives back to not sending out 10,000 texts or 10,000 calls when you only need 50,000, sorry, 5,000. So I
Right.
think that's really, really critical. And that's where mixed mode becomes powerful because you can reduce bias by reaching out to different types of respondents across many different types of channels.
And Joel, I know you have some thoughts on this as well
Well,
as a methodologist
I
and a
don't have any,
statistician.
I don't have any evidence or experience that suggests that by us using reminders, we're introducing any unreasonably or even higher level of bias, of non-response bias in there. And I'm racking my brain to think of all the different studies we've done on different topics with different subpopulations and different geographies. And no, I can't think of one. However, I do know that I'm very active in APOR and ASRO. ASRO is the Association of Academic Survey Research Organizations, so colleges like us. And a whole lot of folks talk a whole lot about bots and data validity and using internal validity checks and checking for speeders and all those things. We do that, but we have very, very, very limited exposure to it because we don't pay rewards. What's the incentive
Right.
for
Right.
someone to speed through, to stuff the ballot box, to do something like that? And we haven't seen that. So I think that our data quality is much more on the please and thank you, and it's legitimate and it's important. And I don't mind reminding you 2 or 3 times that please and thank you and so on. I don't think that we burn that bridge, but we would be very hesitant other than in certain specific instances where a survey is incredibly long or it's a really difficult to access subpopulation, like the active military is the one that's a big subset in Northern New York at Fort Drum, that we would use any types of rewards or incentives. I don't know if I really answered your question, but
No, I think you did. I remember in some of our conversations previously, Joel, that your perspective was that in fact going multimodal may actually result in quite the opposite of bias and help smooth out some of your responses.
well,
So
absolutely, Peg. We stratify using that.
yep,
We know
yep,
that email push to web, it's the whole definition of bias, systematically over or underrepresenting some group. I could send out 100,000. There are no such thing as 100,000 emails in Lewis County, but if there were, I could keep sending more and more and more, and I'm not going to get
right.
those people under the age of 30. More does not fill in that. And then I have to incredibly wait and have a design effect through the roof, the subset who did fill it out. So absolutely, Peg. There are times that the different modes that we know have a greater likelihood to hit that low income, low education, single mom who does have childcare needs, the big topic that we want right now. We absolutely are not blasting emails. No, we blasted more MMS this morning.
Yep.
Well,
So
that ties to why reaching diverse respondents across all different channels is so important. It absolutely helps reduce that risk with the non-bias
Right.
response rate.
can I pop in something that I think is, we not only peg something you said a few moments ago, monitor and have the ability, I don't have a math formula, haven't had the time to figure it out, the algorithm, but I have the ability to look at 10 o'clock Eastern time and say, oh, I know how many we sent. I see how many have completed the survey. By tomorrow morning when I get up, I'm going to have this many, and we can predict pretty darn well. However, the one today on childcare, I don't know. We've targeted from L2 the groups that are high likelihood to have kids. Well, you know what? At 10:30 in the morning, they're either at work or at college. Their children are at the daycare or they're providing daycare. I bet we'll get a bump tonight because we usually can see the lunchtime bump and the got off work bump. That's how much we see it to be able to predict. And I'm wondering if there are going to be different bumps because of the nature of this targeted subpopulation we're hoping to hit today.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, Jill. One of the advantages of texting is we can specify when people receive them. When we send it out, so it's we can meet them on not only on their terms but on their schedule.
So I think we've talked across a lot of these, and I'm noticing that we have a lot of questions from the audience. So before we wrap up, I'd like to stop at this point and go to some of our questions. So one of the first questions, and Lisa, I think this is targeted to you. What's an example of a bundle that you mentioned early on in this discussion?
So an example would be we had a study with a voter registration file, and it was a 22-minute survey with a 75% incidence rate. And we started out with some quotas very specific to demographics. So we sent out an SMS campaign. We waited a day and a half. We saw where our gaps were in regions and demographics and education, and then we made some phone calls. And then we went back in the field with SMS and finished it up, and it worked very, very well. And the
Great.
SMS boosted our response rate by another 15 to 20% in the underserved areas that we were driving bias in.
So another question, and this is to the panel more generally. When we're talking about targeting, what are some tips to improve targeting that span different industry sectors? Paul, maybe some thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, on the targeting front, obviously it's looking at those core demographics. I know with a lot of researchers, there's 1,500 variables on each file on the voter and the consumer databases. So you've got a lot of things. Now you've got Joel using, childhood, child and household age information. So that's one of the more specific, detailed categorizations we have. But most researchers are starting off with things like age bracketing, like finding out, which age buckets people fall into or generational buckets they fall into. Gender is obviously a huge one that we have in there in both databases. Where it gets a little bit more complicated are things around income, education level, how transient somebody is, whether somebody's in an extreme urban or suburban or rural area. It's really urban and rural. So finding those sort of variables that can move the needle for you and make sure you're not, oversampling or undersampling any given area is definitely what you want to look for. And I think overall, we make it possible through our tools to pull random sample and then weight based on all of those categorizations, including areas, counties, even if you wanted to break it down that way. So there's lots of geo, obviously a huge piece of this as well. So a lot of different ways to really narrow that sample before it comes out.
And this is a bit of a follow-up on the targeting, but how are you geo-targeting cell phones? Are you including any prepaid or burners, or is it just phones with cell provider address appended?
L2 incorporates those into our data, and that's something that's relatively new. I'm not meaning last 4 years that we've really been bringing those in, but in a conscious way, just because there's been such a demand. I didn't realize how large a population that was until we started seeing the statistics on, Cricket Wireless and some of those others that people are using. And so we started heavily investing in those phones. And quite honestly, they're extremely high quality. But the one trick is you got to keep them up to date every 30 days, really,
Right.
30 to 60 days. Otherwise, they burn away.
Well, and to add to that, the prepaid phone and the burner phones, while it adds a little bit of bias in your demographics and your education, but you have numbers that are active, currently active, and that's a big challenge with cell phone sample these days, is the sample's not as active, and so you have numbers that are good, and you're going to reach respondents. So it will help your pickup rate. You just have to make sure you don't bias your demographics and what your overall quota archer is.
And you also have to make sure that you send the right type of message, whether it be MMS or SMS. Some of the burner phones may not have a data plan and cannot receive an MMS message.
And for the panel, how do you deal with potential differences within the data when using multiple modalities on a study? For example, people can respond differently on a phone call versus web. Anybody? Joel?
Yeah.
I
That sounds like
think
a
I know
Joel
what you're
question.
referring to.
Yeah, exactly.
Mode effect is an issue. We continuously look at it. For example, something like a live interview or phone call might say, how'd you evaluate the policing and crime control in your city? Excellent, good, fair, poor. And they're probably not going to read, don't know, prefer not to answer. But when it's a self-administered, whether it's anything online, whether it's email, push to web, MMS, SMS, push to web, right there are the radio buttons for that. And we have seen that has become less and less of a difference, even though there is still some difference. But we question the idea of there could very well have been some forced social desirability on the old modality as compared to what we see right now. So it's something that we haven't completely have solved, but we recognize it, and we use a targeted distribution of our modes. And then what we oftentimes do is we are not a political pre-election polling house. We don't do that for any candidates or anything like that. But every other year we do pull that because it's a way for us to see, is our methodology straying in some way. There's an example where the right answer is out there, and we do the congressional races, the governor's race, and so on. But we also take a look at other things that are in the census, and we'll weight by gender, age, education, racial background, military affiliation are our typical ones, and geography. Those are our typical post-stratification weight variables. But what we don't weight by is marital status, children in the home, household composition, have you been hospitalized, all these things that we can go and find the right answers and look for bias. And we've, ever since, we became really, as you introduce more modes, you wonder, are you introducing, poor data quality? We have not seen any evidence of that. Matt and I gave a paper at APOR about this about a year ago that I did an exhaustive mode effect, looking at the mode effects, and we haven't seen it. Is it possible the person asked this question? Clearly so. but we haven't seen large evidence of it at our place.
And so we have several questions. I'm going to kind of roll them all together, but they basically are focusing in on issues of compliance. So would love some guidance on how to remain compliant with SMS laws when purchasing lists. Since list provider isn't gathering opt-ins, how is company purchasing the list handling TCPA compliance? And are they sending each one at a time manually on P2P? Or getting opt-in to send automatically A to P?
This is where you need to ensure that your texting provider is using a peer-to-peer dialer, not an automated dialer. Those are compliant within the legislation. I mean, that is key. You can indeed text people. They need to have an opportunity to opt out, and once they opt out, you have to send them a notification that you received it, and they have to be taken off of all subsequent texting lists. But it is, as I said, it is possible to text without opt-in permission as long as you have a P2P dialer.
And a question for Joel specifically. How long is the voter bill of rights that you read to the voter? And do you read that for every poll you conduct?
How long is it? A voter bill of rights?
I think it's the IRB that they're possibly referring to.
Okay. It's about, I would say, I should share screen here, about 8 sentences long, and identifies who's the principal investigator, identifies the who's funding the research, how long is the research. It tells them that it's their right to opt out at any point in time, and if they have any questions about methodology or any questions about results, to contact this person. And I don't think I'm leaving anything out of there. I just updated an IRB statement this morning. We use, admittedly, small font on it, and there's no I agree below. And if they don't agree, they are disqualified and out of the survey. But we had fears that that was going to cut our response rate massively. But we thought, oh, well, it's worth it to reduce the number of complaints we get of folks that are contacting, why are you trying to do this and that to me? And that was our probably first piece of evidence about 5 years ago that, wow, if you just treat them like you would your neighbor, really, please, and thank you. And hey, by the way, this is completely transparent. And yes, our research center is a part of the transparency initiative. So we pledge to all of that at APOR. And we don't just do it to be able to say we are there. We do it because it works. It's better research and it gets higher response rates. How many times do you get better research with higher response rates? So we never, ever, I filled out a survey yesterday. I showed these folks that it hit my cell phone and it said, hey, Emily, do you want to do a survey? My name's not Emily. And it said, this is Allison. This was an SMS that came along. That seemed creepy to me. But I filled out the survey because I wanted to see what it was. And it was about sports gambling with a few New York State political, favorability questions in there too. But my point is this, there was no IRB statement. I still don't know who was doing the survey by the end of it. We would never, ever, ever do that. We've spent 27 years establishing a brand name and establishing trust with the media, with the elected officials, with the people in higher education, with the governor's office. We don't want to jeopardize that. And I strongly recommend to folks that transparency is the right thing to do. I'd be happy to share one of our informed consent statements.
Yeah, Lisa, do you experience the same?
I would agree with Joel. Yep.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. Have you looked at attrition rates from panels against frequency of invitations? Those asking to be removed based on number of touches. And a second question, when conducting B2B, do you have a rule of thumb for incentives based on length of survey, respondent title, or topic?
I can address the B2B question. And so as far as incentive, it really rolls down to what the respondents, what they do. A CEO, we're going to incentivize them more with a white paper or something educational, where a head of IT, a cash incentive is more appropriate, and sometimes a community donation. But it really depends on who the respondent is and what the length of the survey is.
What about panel attrition? I don't know if anybody's actually looked at frequency rates there. Have you?
I would love to, if there was a panel that had enough participants in the geographies that we most of the time are in. I would love to do that experiment. I would love to use that panel, see what we get as outcome variables after we do our way and a panel way. We have essentially created our own in-house panel by the opt-ins that we've kept, that we've aggregated over the years because we've had to. And unfortunately, hindsight is 2020. We don't have this wonderful piece of software that has each participant and how many times we've contacted them over the years. I wish we had, but we haven't. So I don't have any panel attrition experience at all.
Right. Okay. And this is another one directed to you, Joel. The question is MMS versus SMS, and what was the net response rate from that texting effort?
As I said, well, maybe I didn't say and clarify. In 2023 is the first time we used Tele-Town Hall to do this. And we used MMS because we were convinced that the object and our brand name and our logo would make a difference and not being restricted to 160 characters. And we used that for about 2 years. And then we ran into the statewide one last fall, 2025. That we're like, oh my God, we've got to do something. Do we need to buy more sample and blast it out more? Or do we take that one we have and send them some reminders? And so we did that, and we're really happily. It's kind of like, discovering the microwave. We didn't expect that we were going to discover this follow-up reminder being so effective, and it was. So the response rates typically are, we do it down to day, down to time of day, and down to county. So we have all of that. I have 5 spreadsheets and the 5 studies all open here, but I'll just tell you a general aggregate on a policy type of study. On our first blast out, we typically get about 2 to 2.5% response rate. And then by the time we send the SMS and then cleanse and purge the partials out and things like that, it's gone up to, we average around 4%. We hadn't been that in email, it's in slices of a percent. In the email push to web, it's 0.7, 0.8, 0.9%. With reminders, maybe it gets up to a little over 1%. Again, we use no rewards in there. So MMS is MMS, SMS as our, and we're thinking about, with this upcoming study we have on another public health issue, we're thinking about, we might send a 3rd reminder out. We haven't ever done that yet, just to see if it's still effective. But we, are at an overall of about 4% response rate on that. So then we can, of course, work backwards on how many we need to sell and what our quotas are that we need. And we've been very happy with that. I would say to Paul, this is what I was going to ask. Is it okay if a panelist asks another panelist a question?
You can, of course.
Many of our clients are public health, whether it's, we just finished a study on legalized cannabis in New York State. We just finished a study on tobacco control and vaping. We're doing a study now on childcare. We just did a study on menstrual issues and adverse childhood experiences and the links between that with SUNY Plattsburgh. As you can imagine, none of those are, do you like a red iPhone versus a pink iPhone? We're not looking at customer things, but we have done some economic impact studies. So here's my question for you. I see it continuing to increase in our world, the idea of health equity, health disparities, social determinants of health, adverse childhood experiences, transportation challenges, food insecurity, housing insecurity. Do you see the list like yours going up where there are more of those social potential things along with the demographic things that I know from experience in voting history that you have that, incredibly? Is that going to be something? Right now we have to ask it. We have to measure it to then have it as a potential explanatory variable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're constantly buying data, right? So we are out there looking for different ways to either model it or to buy it. Buying it is honestly our first choice, because that's known data, that's known information that we can get from purchase information or whatever the sourcing might be. And healthcare, social type data like that's sometimes tricky with HIPAA laws and other things to directly tie back to an individual. But we found that sort of modeling around it using census data in a combination with the consumer data has proven to be effective. We did something recently. We've had a lot of requests from Medicaid participants. That's not a list that exists. We can't just get Medicaid participants. So what we do is we model that based on, income, age, number of children in household versus income, home ownership versus renters, things like that, using all those other variables. So we can do it, but it's just a matter of the certainty that you're looking for in it. But I think, anytime a researcher has a question like that, you just laid those all out. I will make sure that we start looking into them and we reach out to different data providers and see what the linkage is and what the match rate is, and we test quality. We'll go back through TTH and just do some calls, do some texts to make sure that the data is actually solid, and then we'll go ahead and license it. So that's how we operate. Yeah.
Thanks.
So we're coming up to time here. So two final questions. One is, what is a peer-to-peer dialer?
It's a dialer that does not generate automated numbers. It's one-to-one.
Which is TCPA compliant,
Correct.
which keeps you within that.
Which is what we operate on.
And we mentioned early on in some of the modalities, we mentioned a small format Tele-Town town hall. Can you explain that?
Sure. What it is, it's sort of a marriage between a qualitative and a quantitative study. We get a group of people together on our Tele-Town Hall platform, and we're able to ask questions and record answers, similar to a quantitative study. And it's a relatively quick hit to get some quick answers, and you can go in depth.
Great, thank you. So
Sure.
I think some basic summary conclusions here that improving response rates isn't just about sending out more surveys, right? It requires aligning audience targeting with the right methodology. It's recognizing survey fatigue. It's being personal. It's looking at all those different pieces. Clearly, when researchers design studies with respondent behavior in mind, results are better, insights are deeper. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'm going to throw this back to Jennifer.
Thank you. Awesome job, everyone. What a great presentation today. Well, I want to thank our panelists and our moderator, Peg, and TTH Communications. Great from all of you. And I want to thank our audience for joining us today. The recording will be sent out tomorrow via Zoom. We'll also include any further information. Peg will have an email go out in there if you want to request more information or any other questions that you may have. So thank you to everyone. I hope everyone enjoys the remainder of their day, and see you the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Lisa,
Peg.
so long. See you,
Bye-bye.
Peg.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye.
all.
Thanks, Jennifer.